I just
Okay,
did.
ready to go?
Indeed.
So we'll do a little histrionics. Jim asked me to take about 20 minutes, so I'll go pretty quickly through some slides, and we'll hold questions, as he said, until the end. But you guys will be familiar with a bunch, but some of it will be new. So, what's the history and what's the problem? And so I think we all know, but it's kind of interesting to look at the graphic right here of how things have changed on Cape Cod in terms of how many people are here. We're the problem. So it's the number of people that are here, the residents that have really changed the conditions of the water. And I'm talking about all water. We're going to talk about groundwater related conditions. We're going to talk about fresh water. We're going to talk about salt water. We're going to talk about drinking water a little bit. Everything is connected here on Cape Cod. We live on a sandbar with one aquifer. It's interesting to take a look at how much sewering municipal treatment is done right now on Cape Cod. Just take a look at the map. The black shows you how little municipal treatment we have on the Cape. And the town of Marcelble has one of the biggest positions, but still you can see the size of the town relative to the size of the dark area. So there's a long way to go in terms of municipal treatment, and I applaud and we applaud the town for working hard on the expansion of that effort. That we're just at the beginning of a runway. That runway hopefully will help add maybe as many as 10,000 parcels to municipal treatment in the town over the next 30 years. What do we have now? So what we have now are best case Title V systems. And some people still have cesspools, but a Title V system very simply moves the waste away from the house. It does a decent job with that, moving waste away, but it doesn't remove nutrients to any really marked degree. So we're talking about nitrogen principally. For saltwater, nitrogen is the enemy. The conventional wisdom has been that phosphorus is the enemy of fresh water, but the latest thinking really is the balance of both nitrogen and phosphorus are critical for the health of fresh water. And I think we all know that the ponds are particularly troubled. Right now, it's been in the news lately, and that's a condition that I think is going to become more and more problematic over time. So here's the current plan. It's not probably the latest iteration, but it's a pretty good iteration of what the expansion plan is in the town. So $1.1 billion of spend. That includes the financing. It's about $870 million was the last estimate I saw for anticipated construction costs of this. Red would be phase one, as you can see, following Route 28, green, the second phase, yellow, the final phase. And certainly we've been working really closely with the town, and everybody needs to know that, to look at alternatives, and particularly to look at how those alternatives might be able to help the town accelerate the rollout and the cleanup of a lot of the septic related issues, but also perhaps mitigate some of the expansion plan needs over time, particularly in that yellow area. And that's the area that for all of us is so critical, because that's the area that contributes so much to the Three Bays watershed. And I think everybody will know that the Three Bays watershed is the worst watershed in the towns, the third worst on Cape Cod. The neighboring watershed in Papaneset is actually the worst watershed on Cape Cod. So soaring is great, but we need other tools, and that's why we've started to work on other things. We're working on a project in the cranberry bogs that we think is going to be really important, but today we're going to talk about alternative septic systems. So you've got a number of issues that we've identified that the town really understands as well in terms of soaring municipal treatment expansion. It's very expensive. It's going to be a long time coming. There are issues with the disposal plumes. And so I think everybody probably knows that Conservation Law Foundation has identified the plume coming out of Hyannis as being problematic. I want everybody to know that I did have a conversation with Dan Santos today about this. And the town, and I did not know this, does plan to upgrade the systems and to reduce the amount of nitrogen that'll come out of the disposal plant, even as they add capacity for the next generation of rollouts that are going to occur over time. It is problematic, however, because right now the plant only has, as I understand, a capacity for another 5 years, the first 5 years of the plant. And after that, we run out of capacity. So with this plan, we're moving a lot of wastewater around. That requires a lot of power, big carbon footprint. There may be issues, and certainly the Katuah Water Company takes an enormous amount of water that may have been problematic for Little River, which no longer is a river, as everybody knows. It's an issue for the Marston's Mills River, which is a gaining stream, but actually 5.5 million gallons of water a day are taken out of that in the summertime. So that level of that stream actually goes down in the summer pretty dramatically. So we're trying to focus on this as an urgent condition. We really don't want to see the can kicked any further down the road. And so we're trying to work on cost-effective solutions. That's really where we're spending all of our time. And what does that mean? That means we need something effective. We need something affordable. We need something that can accelerate beyond and more rapidly than the 30-year plan. And we really need something that's holistic as far as we're concerned. We want to touch, as I mentioned, the saltwater issues, the freshwater issues, and the drinking water issues, which, excuse me, we think are going to become a bigger and bigger problem over time. Right now, the regulations say that anything over 10 parts, 10 milligrams of nitrogen is a problem for drinking water. None of our drinking water reaches that kind of threshold, but the groundwater does, in fact, reach that threshold in a number of areas. And so it's very concerning because we all know that we take water from all over the town through a series of wells. So one of the systems that we're working on, the one that we're most excited about right now, and by the way, we're not trying to pick a winning horse here so much as go and look at the best technology. We've got a unique asset on the Cape in the Massachusetts Alternative Septic System Test Center. They look at alternative septic systems, and working with George Hurfelder and that team, Brian Baumgartel, one particular system has risen to the fore here. And that's the system pictured right here. It lives in a separate tank, a regular 2,000 gallon type septic tank that you'd see installed in any new septic system that would go in. And it's distributed technology. So we're going to run through some of the characteristics of this. Resilient, low maintenance, real-time monitoring, very cost competitive, we believe, versus soaring. And it's all gravity operated with the exception of one air pump, which is important for denitrification, but it's not important to have an operating Title V system. So if and when we get a hurricane, lose power for weeks at a time, this system will continue to operate just like your regular Title V system does today. And so this is an illustration of what's called the nitro wastewater treatment system. And it's actually elegant in the way the solution is approached. It can be retrofit into an existing Title V system, so you're not changing the structure of a current system. It could be put into a greenfield site, so a brand new house could have this, which would be composed essentially of a Title V system plus this additional tank. It can be expanded to handle bigger areas, commercial systems. Not a problem. A big system just went in at the College Light Opera Company in Falmouth. The first chamber that you can see here that I'm circling, the aeration chamber, what happens there is there's limestone in the tank, the pH is controlled, and nitrification takes place. So this is only the liquid waste that's going into this particular tank. And so it's important you have to chemically nitrify before you denitrify. The second chamber has wood chips in it, and wood chips simply are a carbon source, a source of carbon for a kind of bacteria that respirate nitrogen. That nitrogen is then converted from a liquid into a gas. The gas, as you can see with this illustration, goes out your roof vent, your existing roof vent today. We're breathing 78% nitrogen right now in the atmosphere. It's harmless as a gas. The problem is when it's a liquid, it becomes a fertilizer that's more than a little problematic. So why did we choose this particular system? Because it fits the existing infrastructure. We felt it was critical that it's gravity-based. There is one air pump, takes about the power of one light bulb. You need that. There's a air pump outside of the system, outside of your house, under a fake rock or next to the house somehow. That runs 24/7. The system is actually monitored in real time, so you can see, is the pump working? Is there pressure? What's the air pressure in the tank? And what's the temperature in the tank? And all of these are proxies for how well the system is working. Cost competitive, We believe the system at scale is going to be for a retrofit, $15,000 or $20,000. For a fully new system for a 3-bedroom house, probably in the $20,000 to $30,000 range. That needs to be discovered over time, and we'll talk about how we're going to do more work on exactly what the costs are and how we think it can be paid for over time. So the results are dramatic. For a regular Title V system, your system, our systems, reduces about 25 or 30% maybe of the nitrogen. The other best-in-class systems that are out that have been approved by Mass DEP can get the best case to maybe 75%, 70% reduction. This system in the first 11 installations got an average that you can see of 86, median of 90. The latest results are giving us a 95, 97% reduction in nitrogen, which is really quite extraordinary. And that's why we're so excited about this particular system. So these are images. We've got a full library, a video library. You know, the one benefit besides being bothered by all these Zoom meetings is that we've changed our focus from individual meetings. We're doing a lot of video work. You can go on to our website, Be Clean Water, find videos, our latest newsletter, which will drop in the mail probably on Monday. We'll have links, and you'll be able to use a QR code or directly in the embedded email that you'll get. Take a look at the videos that we have here, which will show a 3 minutes on what is this nitro system and how does it work. The designer and I are having a conversation. What about the septic systems of Cape Cod? What are we going to learn? And this is with George Hoyfelder, Brian Baumgartel, talking about a Title V system, how it works. And everybody needs to understand more about this. It's critical to everybody and to our community. We've got lots of important partners here, whether it's the Nature Conservancy or whether it's Mass DEP or whether it's a U.S. Geological Survey. I think somehow we missed putting the town on this particular screen, but the town I want to highlight is a very important partner for us in this effort. And one of the things I definitely want to mention is the town has applied for a grant with us, but they're the applicant for what's called a municipal vulnerability grant. So typically these grants are for sea level rise, for the kind of dredging that we're doing right now out at the Katuitt Cut. But you're also able to apply for septic systems because as climate change and sea level rise occurs, septic systems are going to be part of the problem and hopefully part of the solution as we discover new ways to do it. So we've applied for a little bit over $1.2 million, and that's going to let us put in a number of these systems. So the first phase of what we're doing as part of that effort was work with the US EPA, the Office of Research and Development, and the US Geological Survey. USGS are the guys who know more about groundwater on Cape Cod and in the United States than anybody else, bar none. They've identified areas for us to put in a test, and the test is meant to understand what happens when we put a lot of these systems in, and what happens when they're ganged together, what happens in the groundwater, what does that do? And the reason that's important, a lot of the conversation about the alternative systems has been no two households are alike. We know that. We've got lots of people on the call today. And I always say, you know, for 7 years, a 3-bedroom house has an older couple, myself and my wife. For 7 years here on the Cape, it's a family of 6. And for 7 years, it might be 13 house painters that are there for the summer. The systems are not going to perform the same in those conditions. And we need to understand how that impacts the groundwater and what that means as the groundwater travels. We think we can get, even in all those cases, over 90% reduction, maybe as much as 98% reduction, as I mentioned. But understanding the changes in the groundwater is very critical. So here, we're concentrating things in the ground. For the town, municipal treatment means we're concentrating it at a municipal plant, and then all that concentration goes in essentially in one locale. We're working with the US EPA to put in, first of all, a number of wells. Here's an illustration just of how many ponds there are on Cape Cod. We started to work around one particular pond, Shubal Pond. And this is Shubal Pond. So you can see, first of all, this picture was taken just a couple of weeks ago, and you can see the cyanobacteria, so the green wispy edge along the top of that pond. That's actually the southeastern corner of that pond. The water on the Cape, pretty much where we are, is all flowing from the northwest to the southeast toward Nantucket Sound. We have the problem, by the way, because our tides are just over 2 feet. The north side has a 10.5-foot tide. Really, they don't have a lot of the same problems because of flushing that we have. The ponds are getting more and more concentrated because of this groundwater flow of septic. And this pond is particularly problematic, so it happens to be a perfect area for us to do the work to understand groundwater. So what's going on here is EPA and USGS are putting in this month about 10 wells to look at the groundwater flow to prove exactly where it's coming from. That's critical because groundwater can move around. It's very hard to track. On the right-hand side, you'll see how dense this community is around here. There's about 350 homes contributing to this one area. And so we're going to study each individual septic system we install, the influent, the effluent. We're going to put lysimeters in many cases underneath the leaching field to understand what the changes are there. We're then going to be doing a groundwater monitoring wells, multi-level sample wells, 80 feet deep. They monitor water, wastewater, groundwater every 4 feet for 80 feet using isotopes. The USGS and EPA can identify exactly where the nitrogen comes from. So you can see, is the nitrogen from a human? Is it from a horse? Is it from the golf course that's to the north there? Where is it from? We can understand that and identify that, and that's going to be really important. And then we can track it all the way into the pond and see how the groundwater changes and how are the pond conditions changing as well. This will be the first work of this kind that's being done. It's the only work the US EPA is supporting of this kind in the United States. And we think it's groundbreaking, and it's the kind of work we believe that's going to help over time, over a generation, change Cape Cod back to conditions that many of the people on this call remember, because it didn't look like this. So we've got a lot of work to be done. We'll put in between 10 and 30 of these systems in phase 1 around Shubal Pond. We've also said that we're willing, Barnstable Clean Water Coalition, to have grants and have people apply for grants. Anybody that's interested, please go to our website and apply for the grant. The dots here are people that have applied for the grant already. We're going to have grants of between $2,500 and $10,000 to put in these new systems. And I want to say again and emphasize, this system we hope is the first of other systems. And the way the trajectory works for looking at alternative systems is there are 3 phases. The first phase is a pilot system, has to have as many as 15 systems in the ground operating for 2 years. This is a mass DEP regulation. That data is then looked at and analyzed, and based on success at that point, a provisional permit is then allowed. And that allows up to 50 systems to go in to be monitored for 3 years in order to get to a full approval, which happens only after that time. So the system that we're looking at, the nitro system, was approved about 6 weeks ago for provisional approval. Every other system, alternative system, is approved for 19 milligrams of nitrogen. This system was approved at 11, but in fact, the latest data is getting us down to numbers that are close to 5, in many cases close to 3. And so optimized, we believe we'll be looking at between 3 and 5 over time as these systems continue to be worked on and get tuned. So this is our latest newsletter, the cover thereof. You know, we're excited about the work that we're doing. We're, as everybody, disappointed in the kind of issues that we face. The water conditions in Cotuit and Cotuit Bay are abysmal and nothing like what I grew up with or what people here remember. This is some kids at Shubal Ponds. The ponds are closed for swimming, closed for dogs. And so we've got a major battle in our hands, and we need all the help we can get. So I'll wrap up there, and I'm happy to take any questions, but that's a quick thumbnail on where we are and what we're doing. So thank you. Jim, I don't know how you want to open up the mic for people or whether people are going to go on the chat room.
My suggestion is that people go in the chat room if they want to ask a question, and if they want to speak, I'm happy to have them open up their mic. But if we just open it up, we'll get a lot of feedback loops and other problems.
Maybe
So
if you see the chat and you want to relay to me, I'll answer the
yeah,
question.
that's what I was going to do.
Everybody
And if
can.
people want to ask the question themselves, they can just put their name in the chat and I'll
Great.
call upon you.
Sounds good.
Okay. We have a question for the new system. What are the maintenance costs?
So the new systems we think are going to cost probably between $400 and $500 a year. There is for the first 50, a component of quarterly monitoring that'll likely cost another $400 a year. So in the beginning, it's probably $900 a year. What we're hoping we are able to do, and we're working with, again, the state, with the Clean Water Trust. We're working with the county. The county right now has a funding mechanism for Title V systems that are failed, that people can apply for grants. Right now, the interest rate's 5%, too high in my view, but we hope that this could be a mechanism for these systems to become eligible for state revolving fund money. And so our vision is that over time, we could see septic systems like this as a service. So it may be that even though the cost is $20,000 or $30,000, perhaps one day in the future, we have a situation, and my view, we should have a situation where any new system should be a system like this. Any failed system, if it's not going to see municipal treatment, should get a system like this. Perhaps on a title change, that'll be a catalyst for an upgrade of a system. And maybe at that time and over time, we'll have a situation where you're asked to pay $75 or $100 a month, but there's no other installation fee, there's no other fees involved. Everything happens outside of your home, and it's really a seamless municipal service, just like so many of our other services. And we think in the end, that'll be the kind of roadmap that we'll see. But it's going to take a while to get there. And yes, there are maintenance costs, but that's part of what we believe will be the ability to optimize and maintain these systems. The systems we think are going to last longer than the systems, the Title V systems now. We're thinking of this as Title VI. The water that comes out of these systems is practically potable. In fact, the designer believes that he'll be able to take these systems into some places and the water will in fact be treated as potable water. It's not only the nitrogen that's reduced, it's every other waste element that's coming out of these systems is being dramatically reduced. So that's going to mean you don't need as big of a leaching field. That's going to mean this water technically should be able to be used for your garden or for whatever. So that's a long-winded way to say, yes, there are costs right now. Those costs are going to change over time as the system is better understood and the rollout has more and more demonstration sites.
Okay. Next question. How do nitro systems treat phosphorus in lake and pond watersheds?
Right now, they don't. Phosphorus is a different element. And so it's difficult to get it out. We think in most of the ponds, the problem seems to be that there is residual phosphorus in the pond in a lot of the sediment. The early testing that we've done, we haven't seen a lot of phosphorus coming out of the household systems. We do have designs in place to be able to reduce and eliminate phosphorus with an add-on to this system. So it would just be an additional tank, small tank, that would enable you to do that. It might require more service. Maybe you'd have to service it every 3 to 5 years, but it can be done. Just like we could do an add-on to treat for PFOS and PFAS or other things. So one of the things that's nice about the system is it's modular. So we could add on treatment for things that are escaping the treatment that this system is delivering.
Next, Conrad Geiser would like to make some comments vis-a-vis dry toilets. Conrad, sure. Go ahead.
Hi, Z. Thanks. Thanks for all the work in this. So it looks great. You know, it's nice to see the progress. I know we're not on the agenda, but Brian and I and another experienced composting toilet person, have been working on some a project showing urine. Sorry, my comments aren't well prepared. Excuse my
All right.
hesitations here, but just viral degradation in stored urine and the possibilities. Basically, trying to look at the parameters for using urine and manure from a dry toilet situation as resources, as opposed to the approach of trying to eliminate them, somehow from the wastewater stream. And the thinking behind that is that as we approach 10 billion people, that the model that we're so used to in terms of mining and or fixing nitrogen for nutrient use for growing food, and then throwing it away on the other end will not be sustainable. So that's where that effort is going. It's in a recognition that we actually need to change under current paradigms the approach. Given the energy inputs as you noted, with all sort of wastewater treatment, moving the water, aerating, the anaerobic stages for nitrogen removal, and whatever it will take to take the phosphorus out as well. All are difficult, as I'm sure you appreciate, technically and from an energy standpoint. So just a 2 cents. It's something that has been tried, as we know, here and there without great success. The most familiar one probably for people on Cape Cod being the Falmouth Eco Toilet program, which didn't get a lot of traction. But nonetheless, I think going forward that should be part of the conversation and stay in the within the sights of these efforts to try to get these nutrients out of the water, and basically the objective being, don't put them in the water to begin with. Thanks.
Thanks, Conrad. I think, listen, the key part of my message here is it's not going to be one thing that's going to solve this problem. We need lots of different approaches. So I think that there is a place for composting toilets. There's no doubt in my mind. And many people might have seen Don Law and Sarah Molyneux have some pretty nice composting toilets, by the way. So it's technology that's well beyond your grandfather's composting toilet. There's no doubt about that. I think one of the challenges that we've really focused on is, unless we can get mass adoption, this problem is not going to be dealt with. And so that was one of the things really that I want people to think about with looking at the map of the plan for the town, is that the white space doesn't get anything, right? And so the math that we've done is there's 165,000 households on Cape Cod. Mass DEP says maybe, eventually, maybe 40,000 of those will get municipal treatment. So right now, the town has about 3,000 people out of the 26,000 parcels that are on municipal treatment. That'll grow, but it's still not even going to get to half of the town. And so we don't touch areas when we need really everybody to participate in a change over time. And so that's the main reason that we're focused on this kind of technology, is how do we get tens of thousands of these systems in the ground and operating, hopefully in a generation, hopefully. So, our children and grandchildren can enjoy the kind of water conditions that I grew up with, that many of us grew up with, when there was eelgrass in, the Cotuit Harbor, when the water was clear and you could see more than 18 inches if you're lucky these days. So it's the mass adoption question, and that gets back to the cost issue. So if you looked at the math around the cost, if it's $87,000 a parcel to expand municipal treatment in the town of Barnstable, not including financing, so then you get to over $100,000 a parcel. And if this system can be delivered for, even if it's more than I'm saying, $30,000 or $40,000, then for $1.1 billion, we could have the entire town treated. Everybody. Same number, everybody. And that's the kind of thing that I'm hopeful over time. And that doesn't mean we shouldn't have composting toilets. It doesn't mean we don't need more oysters in the water to clean the existing conditions. It doesn't mean we can't clean up some of the existing conditions, because groundwater moves 2 to 4 feet a day in Cape Cod. So we've got groundwater with us for decades, even if we were lucky enough to put a lot of this in tomorrow. And I think, you know, the disruption that we're going to see from the construction efforts and putting in municipal treatment are not to be trivialized. And everybody here has been driving up and down Route 28 when we've had a very small state project in one intersection that seems to have gone on for months. And that we haven't even started to do any soaring. It's amazing. Anyway, sorry to go on, but thanks, Conrad. I think you're absolutely right. We need composting toilets. We need other technologies, no doubt about it.
Z, someone asks that they heard that these systems need to be recharged.
No, we're going to look to understand and do the work around how and if they need any kind of maintenance. So we think that maybe in 10 or 15 years, you might have to add a little bit of limestone to the limestone that's there. Maybe the wood chips will degrade to some extent over 20 years or 30 years, and then you'd have to replace the wood chips, but wood chips are cheap, and you'd suck the wood chips out and replace them with new wood chips, just like you'd currently pump your septic tank. So these are not big items. They're not expensive. We think that'll all be wrapped in. So we don't think there's any other recharge other than that. And there is power, as Conrad points out, but it's only the power of about, one light bulb. So it's not a lot of power, but it is some power. But even with no power, the system is going to operate as a Title V system, but better. And that's one of the things we like a lot about it, because we all know there'll be a big storm sometime. We'll lose power for probably days or weeks, and we're going to need a system that you can continue to operate. The other alternative systems that we looked at required constant power. George Hoyfelder has a great system that we like very much, which is called the layer cake system that many people might have heard about. It's a good system. It gets really great results, but it requires pressure dosing in the pumps. The pumps have to constantly dose the leaching area. And so if you don't have power after about 48 or 72 hours, you can't use that system. And for us, I think that's tough. That's a game changer in my view here on Cape Cod.
Z, somebody asks, if everybody in Katuitt had this new system installed hypothetically today, how long would it take to clean up the bays without dredging?
So that's a great question, and if you look at this map, it's not just Katuitt, okay? It's that whole upper area. So you can kind of see the outline of the blue line that goes all the way into Sandwich on this map, a town of Barnstable map. It treats Sandwich like it's North Korea. So it pretends like there's nothing there, but there's a lot there, as we know. And then so the golf courses, the people, the households are all contributing to that area. And the water comes down pretty quickly. So one of the reasons we're focused on the Marston's Mills River, and we're still working on restoration of the cranberry bogs, dredging Mill Pond, and other associated things that we think could make a difference. And that's because about 40% of the excess load flows down the river and reaches from an area by the Indian Ponds and into Katuitt Bay in a matter of hours. Hits Prince Cove probably in 4 hours. So the groundwater changes are going to be slow. Like I said, 2 to 4 feet a day. And we frankly need to understand more exactly about where and how that groundwater is coming in. We've actually done some work with a towed array system in the winter to look at groundwater, fresh water that's coming into the Katuitt Bay, and particularly into the Narrows. There's an area in the Narrows going into North Bay where back in the day, I'm told you could get fresh water out of the salt water when it was frozen because there's such a big underground spring that's coming in there. So trying to discover some of those areas that could be big load factors is part of what we're trying to do to look at for treatment overall. So really, I think you know, not only do we need everybody to participate, we may need some areas that become more critical to treat sooner than later. And we need to identify those. We don't know all those answers yet.
Could you use the water coming out of this system as external irrigation for your own use?
I think you could, but you're not permitted to do it yet. But we think that that's absolutely going to be something that is going to be is going to be very possible. It's easily usable for those purposes, easily.
There's a follow-up question from the fellow who asked about the dredging. His question is really, how do we get the nitrogen out of the bays?
So that's a great question. I mean, you know, flushing over time will help, but really you just got to stop putting it in the bays. That's the problem, is that the math around the Massachusetts Estuary Project says that the load in all three bays is around 47,000 kilograms annually. And the amount that we should have to be sustainable is around 25,000. So we're almost double what we should be. And so it's reducing that target that we really need to accomplish. And it's not just the nitrogen, the idea of putting oysters and having oysters. And so Chris Gajullo and the other oyster farmers are doing a great service for the town because the oysters are filtering. Each oyster may filter up to 50 gallons of water a day. It's an enormous amount of water that's treated, but they're removing the algae, the algal blooms. The reason the water is brown is because it's full of algae. The reason that there's muck on the bottom where you used to walk on sand, you know, around the flats around here, now it's all muck. The muck is dead algae. That's what's going on. And it's year in and year out, the algae dies, sinks to the bottom, and that's gradually choking off the life that's traditionally been on the ground here. You know, some of that may be reversible, but it's a major piece of work to try to figure it out. It's another thing we're trying to figure out, how do you remove some of that muck and maybe put shellfish back in areas where right now there are no shellfish. So it's a battle to remove everything out of the bays, that's for sure.
Zia, are there any other towns on the Cape that are using the system?
So Falmouth has the system. The majority of these systems are right now in Tisbury on Martha's Vineyard. And so right now there's 18 of these systems that have been installed. Remember, they were limited to just 15 until just 6 weeks ago. So we have plans. You saw the number of people that have applied for our grant is over 30. With the municipal vulnerability grant application, we put another 30 in or so. So we could get to the 50 quickly. And our goal is to get quickly to that 50 because we need that operating for 3 years or more or less to get the data that DEP is going to require. We are seeing other towns put in regulations. We don't have a good regulation in this town to limit, you know, septic systems, Title V systems going in. It drives me crazy, frankly, to see replaced systems, new systems going in right by the water. And we see this all the time. And everybody knows, and they drive around and they could see, you know, whatever water body you want to talk about, and you got a new house going up and it's going to have a Title V system. And so they're going to pollute right there. Boom. Thank you very much. There could be tight tanks. The Board of Health really should change the regulations. A tight tank is just a tank that would have to be pumped and brought to the treatment plant to be treated, so you weren't leaching everything directly into the bays. The town of Wellfleet is looking at more restrictive legislation, but permitting. Marion, the town of Marion has just put some more restrictive usage in. I think we'll see more of these go in sooner rather than later. Part of our work, though, showed that the other alternative septic systems, and we did this work with the US EPA, there's about 3,000 on the Cape alternative septic systems in use now. Unfortunately, they really don't work. And that was the dirty little secret, so to speak. We did the work, we did statistical analysis on the other systems. There's about 10 different kinds that are being used, but they don't accomplish a significant reduction in nitrogen and other nutrients, in which case we think we were spinning our wheels until we get and can prove the kind of data that we're seeing now with a system like this. This system, like we said, we expect there'll be others, but right now this is the one that is best in class.
Well, one last question for you, Z. Do you have
Sure.
any estimates of the percentage contribution of nitrates and phosphates from septic systems versus lawn fertilization and sprinkler systems?
Yeah, about 85% of the problem is septic systems. And that's, round math. About the balance is pretty much split between stormwater and fertilizer. It's going to be different depending on the exact location, but that's pretty good math that you can count on, unfortunately.
Thanks, Z. That's been a great presentation. Everybody's very grateful for the information.
Well,
A question just came in. Did we hear correctly that the cost to connect to sewers per parcel is $87,000? How did you arrive at this number?
no, this is, let's make sure we understand exactly what that means. The cost to construct this expanded plant over 3 decades is currently estimated to be about $1.1 billion.
And that's the
that
town of
number-
Barnstable comprehensive plan.
That number may have changed. I may not have the latest numbers on that because I know some of the plan has changed because the town is still working through and finalizing the comprehensive water management plan that the state mandates for all towns. So we're in the midst of doing that. But this is a number that was $870 million for construction alone. And that's for, you can see on the screen here, 9,800, 9,900 parcels. So that's how you get to the $870 million. But recognize that this was looking at to be funded by a number of different mechanisms. So the town would look to borrow, the town would look for grants, the town would look for increased taxes, the town would look for many, many things. There is state revolving fund money that's available for 0% financing. There are conditions where as much as 25% of a grant can be eliminated, can be given back, eliminated from the debt service. So when you look at that, how much, I think that nobody on the town can currently tell you when they knock on your door some years from now, if you're in one of these areas and they're going to ask you to hook up. We don't know what that number is going to be. 10,000? I forget, Jessica might be on the line. I forget what Stewart Creek was. I want to say that was 8,000 or something like that. This was years ago. Maybe it's 10, maybe it's $20,000. I don't know, but I'm sure it'll be financed long-term. So, but listen, we're all paying for it. Everybody in the town is going to pay that bill, not just somebody who's knocking on your door because it's going by your house. And that's one of the, I think, political conditions that everybody needs to be aware of. And that's why I put this map up, because there's a lot of white space. And so already early on in hearings that have occurred at town council, previous administrations who represented areas that have a lot of white space have said, why are we paying for a plan that we're not getting anything out of? Well, it's not really true. They don't get anything out of it, but I understand how people could feel that way. So
to be clear, that number is taking the total cost of the anticipated sewering comprehensive project of the town and dividing it by the number of parcels that would be reached by it.
that's
It's
correct.
not a connection fee that any individual would have to
Right.
pay.
That's right. It's not a connection fee.
Before we break, Jessica Rapgrassetti did have, she wanted to report some news about the wastewater treatment plant in Hyannis. Jessica?
Thank you, Jim, and thank you, Z. Your updates are very warranted and appreciated. So thank you very much. I did want to report that at the August 20th meeting of the Town Council, we will be putting to a second read, which will take place on September 3rd, an item for $8,500,000 for upgrades to the wastewater treatment facility in Hyannis that Z spoke about. I think that's the plant's getting old. It was built in the 90s, so it needs a lot of upgrading. So, but that's going to be, that's going to affect the rates of the users because it's coming out alone out of the Water Pollution Control Enterprise Fund. So right now, the ratepayers pay for upgrades, and that's what the $8 million. So it won't have an impact on the operating budget of the town. So just wanted to give that report. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jessica. And again, on behalf of everybody on the call, thank you very much to Z for an extensive presentation and taking the time to answer everybody's questions. We all know how important this issue is over the long haul to the town generally, to Katuitt specifically, and anybody who lives on any of the estuaries or bays in the area. So more to come to be sure, but thanks a great deal. I have recorded this presentation and I will be making the link available to people who would like to have a look at it. So with that, I'm going to call the meeting to an end. And thanks to everybody for participating, and particularly thank you again to Z Crocker.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you, Jim. My pleasure.